Hey guys, Bree from Bree Beers and Associates here, and after 9 months of waiting for more and more guidance to come out on how the PPP forgiveness was going to be handled, on January 19th of 2021, we finally got what we needed. We finally got 95% of the guidance in order to get these PPP forgiveness loan applications submitted. So that's what we're going to talk about today. There are 3 forms that have been released, and every business falls into just one of these forms, okay? There's the 3508S. That one's the best. We'll talk about it first. There's the 3508EZ, and there's the 3508. Okay, that one's terrible, and we'll end with that one because it's just, it's going to make your soul want to cry. So let's start with the easiest one, the best one, the one I hope most of you guys are able to complete, and that's the 3508S. So how bad is the 3508S? It's not. It is the best, the simplest, the easiest of all 3 forms. It's technically a one-pager. It is front and back, and there are tons of pages of instructions and things you got to read, but the application itself, 1 page front and back. And the best part I think about this form is that you don't have to submit any additional documentation, but you do have to certify on the application that you've spent the money correctly, you spent it in the right amount of time, a whole bunch of little things, right? Basically certifying that you followed the rules. So do please make sure that you read it carefully. And if you have any questions about any of the items, you ask somebody. Because there is one statement on there, you guys, that says if you lie on this form, you will get really heavy fines or you could go to prison. So make sure you're not lying, okay? So my 3508S users, you're gonna fall into one of 2 buckets, either loan amounts under $50,000, or if your loan amount was between $50,000 and $150,000. So for my borrowers who borrowed between $50,000 and $150,000, okay, there is a section that says, by using this form, you attest that, and it goes into the fact that you're saying you satisfied the FTE and wage requirements, which we will talk about at the very end of this video. Or if you didn't satisfy those requirements, you are gonna have to do some calculations off on the side. You don't have to submit them, but you'll have to calculate how much can actually be forgiven, because if you don't satisfy those FTE, full-time equivalent, or wage safe harbors and requirements, you don't get it fully forgiven. So don't want to freak you out here, but basically what it comes to is $50,000 to $150,000 loans. If you didn't cut anyone's hours and you didn't cut anyone's pay, you're good. There's nothing to submit. You get full forgiveness. You're good. If you did have to cut people's hours or cut people's pay, then we got to calculate how much your PPP forgivable portion is going to decrease. All right, you do that on your end. You just put the ending results, the figures, on this form. So again, no additional support needed, but you are going to have to do a few extra calculations. And we will, again, talk about those safe harbors in just a minute. So for loans under $50,000, you don't have to attest anything. You essentially get a free pass on the FTE and wage requirements. So that's pretty cool. That's all I got to say about that. You get to sign away, make sure you say that, yeah, you spent the money right. Yeah, you spent it in the amount of time, all those things, and that's it. So for my loans under $50,000, you should be able to do this pretty easily and pretty quickly. So the next step up in forms is our 3805EZ. So this one is for anyone who borrowed over $150,000 and who have met those FTE and wage requirement safe harbors that, again, we'll talk about at the end. So how bad is this one? It's really not that bad at all either. So it's a 2-page document. There are some figures that you got to put on the front page in terms of how much money you spent, how much you're asking to be forgiven. So it's not quite as simple as the 3508S, but overall, still really, really easy. There is minimal documentation to submit with this one. You will have to supply the payroll reports that prove that you spent money on payroll. And if you're asking for forgiveness on anything else you spent the money on, so health insurance, retirement contributions, if you're paying your utilities or your rent, you have to show your statements or your canceled checks or your invoices for those. So basically, proof that you made payments for these things, right? That you spent the PPP money on things in the right amount of time, okay? But that's it. You don't have to show any complicated calculations, anything like that. So we're good there again. Then there's the 3508. So who has to use this monstrosity? So all borrowers who had a loan over $150,000 and do not satisfy the FTE and wage reduction requirements. Y'all are gonna have to use this form. So please avoid this at all costs. My expert advice here is if you think that you're gonna have to do the 3508 in its entirety, enlist some help. Because one of two things can happen. This person will either look at your stuff and realize that you don't have to fill out the full 3508 and they can help you fill out the 3508 EZ, or they're gonna ensure that the 3508 is completed correctly. So again, if the 3508 is looking like it's on your radar, find an expert to help you. If you need one, we got you. We can help you. Contact us. So how bad is this one? I already told you it's a monstrosity. So it's a 2-page document like the other ones, but there's a Schedule A, there's also a Schedule A worksheet, and that doesn't necessarily sound terrible when I say it, but guys, with all the required calculations, documentations, it really, really is. This is going to be a time-draining project to do. So again, find some help. All right, so as we've talked about these 3 forms, we kept talking about FTE and wage reduction and safe harbor. So we're gonna dig into what those mean and what it means for you as you're going through this application for forgiveness process. When we say safe harbor, that essentially means that you don't have to do the extra work and you're certifying that you don't have to reduce your forgivable amount because you didn't cut people's hours or cut people's pay. For loans under $150,000, safe harbor means you don't have to reduce your forgivable amount. For loans over $150,000, safe harbor means you get to file the EZ form rather than the full form. Before we get into the specific safe harbors, I want to remind you that all of these still assume that you spent the money correctly, right, on qualified expenses, and you spent it within the given amount of time, and you certify that yes, your business was negatively impacted by COVID. Your safe harbor means you're just being safe harbored from proving your FTE, full-time equivalent, and wage reduction requirements, okay? So what are these safe harbors? So we're gonna go from simplest to most complex. So if your loan is under $50,000, you're safe harbored, nothing else to worry about. If your loan is over $50,000, then you have 3 potential routes to safe harbor you can take. The first says if you are unable to operate between February 15th and the end of your covered period at the same capacity that you were before February 15th, then there you go. That is one route to safe harbor. So this really applies to my restaurants, my venues, okay, that completely shut down. The key to this, though, being that you couldn't hold that same business level because of compliance requirements from the CDC or the local health department, all right? So what this means is if you just couldn't do business because your clients didn't come back, that doesn't qualify. If you couldn't do business at the same level because you could only hold 25% of people in your restaurant than you could before, or you could hold 0 people in your event venue because events weren't happening, because COVID guidelines said you can't have groups of people, right? Those count as that first safe harbor. The second path to safe harbor for those loans over 50 grand is if you did not cut the number of full-time employees between January 1st and the end of your cover period, and you didn't cut anyone's pay by more than 25%, then you're good. You've satisfied safe harbor. Finally, if you did have to cut your employees' pay or the number of employees working in your establishment, But for one of the following reasons, you can qualify for safe harbor. So if you could not rehire your specific employees and you could not replace them with someone similarly qualified, but by the end of your covered period or by December 31st of 2020, you'll be granted safe harbor. If you reduced your employee hours, right, then you got the PPP and you offered to restore their hours, but they refused, safe harbor. The important piece to both of these, you guys, is that you have to have good documentation. So if you're saying you couldn't rehire someone back and you couldn't hire someone qualified to the same same skill level, you have to show that you had a job posting out there. Maybe show proof of interviews, of trying to replace that position. Same goes for if you're using the safe harbor of you offered the job back, but they refused. You have to show some sort of documentation of communication between you and that employee, whether it's by email or by text, or maybe just a call log saying, offered XYZ, whoever, the job back. They told me they didn't want it. All right, so just some sort of internal documentation that proves you tried. All right, this is not something that has to be submitted, but something that you want to keep on record should they ever come back and audit you. So the bottom line to all of this, you guys, is to find a legitimate way to safe harbor, because safe harbor is going to make your life so much easier. It's either going to make it so you don't have to reduce your PPP loan amount, or it's going to save you a ton of paperwork because it's going to allow you to use an easier form. Regardless, we want to emphasize the word legitimately. Again, when all is said and done, you have to initial and certify that you are doing everything in good faith and that you are not lying and all that good stuff. So please, please make sure that you do understand these forms in their entirety. And if you have questions, ask a professional. If you guys have any questions about what we talked about today, go ahead and leave a comment below. And then I highly, highly suggest you head on over to our Facebook community, Money, Taxes, and Finance for Small Business, because these topics are what we talk about on a regular basis and have live trainings on every week. You can access that group by clicking the link in the description box. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and while you're loving on me hard, go ahead and hit the notification bell so you never miss a future video.